Manana Jesus y Mina 35 na legislatura en Guahan is back from recess. We are still in the second reading file. Right now on the agenda, we have Bill 132-35 COR. Senator Tello Taitigui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues. Madam Speaker, first I would like to apologize to my colleagues.
Can we?
Sorry. Madam Speaker, I would like to place Bill 132, make a motion to place 132 on the third reading file, and I'd like to speak on the bill, please.
On that
Point
motion-
of order.
Yes, ma'am. State your point of order, Majority Leader.
Sujas Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in accordance with our rules, page 46, section 3,
Yes, ma'am.
bills reported to Il Legislature en Guahan containing an appropriation shall be considered by Il Legislature en Guahan in a committee of the whole chaired by the chairperson of
have
the
a-
Committee on
yes.
Appropriations
Do you have a
or the
motion?
chairperson's, this is my point of order, or the chairperson's designee who must be a committee member prior to a vote. So, Madam Speaker, my question is, are we forgoing the committee of the whole process?
No, we
This
are
is an
not.
appropriation
Is there a
bill.
motion on the floor, Vice Speaker?
Yes, Madam Speaker. I believe that we need to go into,
Is there a
Committee of the
motion
whole.
on the Committee of the
okay.
Whole?
I make a motion to go into
On
committee of
that
the whole.
motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, we will recess for 5 minutes to get the table set up. Sana Masi.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Committee of the Whole on Bill 132 is now convened. We would have, the rules of engagement is, we will start out with the author of the bill, that will introduce the bill and the circumstances that led to this bill. And then we'll have the Sergeant Arm bring up the panel that will be present, and we have the Chief of Police, Steve Ignacio, and Steve Guerrero, the OFB Director. Questions for the panel will be asked in 2 rounds. I will not put a time limit because I don't believe this bill needs that much time. Amendment must be submitted in writing to the clerk and legal counsel before motion to amend is made on the floor. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Sergeant Arms, could you please bring in the panel? Thank you. Senator Tello, a correction. Yes, Tello Taidui.
Yes, thank you.
Ma'am, would you please do your introduction of your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity and to speak a little bit on Bill 132. I'm pretty sure that what I have to say is probably not as important as the Chief of Police and as well as OFB, the questions that will be asked of you and answered from you. And I will try and make this as short as possible. I do believe you're very busy, especially the Chief of Police. You have better things to do right now to going out there and protecting our community, keeping it safe, which you do very well. But this bill would actually give you more of an opportunity to do such that by being a force multiplier and providing cameras in areas that will bring a safer environment for our community. Know that there's people out there looking after them. You know, it's a very simple bill, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to get too much into it and allow the 2 gentlemen to speak on this measure. And I'd like to thank everyone who supported Bill 20, the original bill, which does the same exact thing. And, you know, Mr. Chair, I didn't object to allowing the Committee on the Whole, but I just hope that we can move this along. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Taidui. We also have Mr. Rosario being sworn in. He's the Department of Administration representative. Sir, do we have any questions from any of the senators? No questions? Ma'am? Oh, you can't hear me? Okay. I'll speak louder. Yes, Senator Terlai.
Thank
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
Mr. Chair. I have just very quick questions. First of all, for the Chief of Police to expedite his time here. I think, if I remember correctly, we all supported Bill 20. So we support that addition of security cameras for the police department to augment the security cameras that are put up by GVB and to augment the cameras that are going to be procured a little later by Parks and Rec for parks and historic places. So it looks like, and then we heard the testimony on Bill 20 as to where the police intends to put these, well, at least which precincts they intend to put the additional cameras. I guess I just wanted to find out between Bill 20 and this current bill, has anything changed? Is there an emergency that has occurred that these cameras are going, is this bill addressing an emergency?
Ma'am, just recently, as of last week, I lost 5 additional officers to deployment. 5 additional officers left to a Army Guard deployment, and so they're in the Middle East. So those are my challenges, and so when we look at surveillance cameras or video cameras that we're going to use, they now become the eyes and ears for the department, especially eyes. And they've been a valuable tool in helping us solve crimes and also prevent crimes, because people know that the cameras are there and they serve a crime prevention purpose.
All right. Will they be announced, the locations?
Yes, so I think primarily what we're looking at is, because we have a new precinct coming up down here in Sinaanya, so we're looking to expand the surveillance systems outside of Tumon. And so we're looking at areas down here in Hagåtña, the Plaza de España, the Paseo, and so some of the parks down in the central area, because we have no current and existing surveillance systems.
All right, thank you. I guess, yeah, so in the letter that was written by the police department, it says Tumon, Tamuning, Derido, Hagåtña, Agate, and I just was wondering, I know you also submitted a protocol, which I was very impressed by how fast that turned around. But did they state in there that, is the public going to know exactly where the cameras are? I guess that's all I want to know right now.
Yes, absolutely. So everybody knows that where the cameras are at in Tumon. Okay. People know that the cameras are there and they're present.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chief, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask OFB just one question? Then my only question for OFB, if you could just explain when the veto message, how the error was not, how is that information that is available to us here at the legislature, or is it possible that this situation might continue to happen? Is that information that's only available that we should require an additional reporting or anything so that we can have that type of information?
My understanding, Senator, is that the information that's provided to the legislature regarding the AS400, as of today, is that the only one that has access to that is OFB. Now, I'm not too sure exactly to what extent the administration is willing to avail AS400 information to individual senators. I don't know. But I'm also at this time requesting additional access to some of the files within the AS400 to get more details on special funds, including the general fund. And if you don't have access to certain files within these funds, it's hard to make any type of determination at any given time.
Thank you. That's my concern too. I'm not asking for access for my office, only for OFB, so that when we send you bills, we can get actual, real information that's relevant to us to make these quick decisions instead of, the back and forth veto and we redo it. So yes, if there's language that would help you in the future, I would encourage the chair. I support that to demand that type of access for OFB and the legislature.
Does any other senator have any other questions? If there's no other, yes, Senator Torres, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the Chief of Police. There was a pressing need, apparently, for this bill to be heard today under the guise of an emergency situation. And in looking at the intent of both Bill 20 and this new Bill 132, which addresses the same issue, the funds that are being appropriated are to be used to purchase, operate, and maintain security cameras and related equipment in public areas. In the bill, the language is to assist with the deterrence and reporting of criminal activity. I was wondering whether, I know that there was some grant monies that were set aside as well for cameras, but I was wondering, what is the progress right now with regard to the procurement of cameras? And does this money at this exact moment, this immediate moment, have a bearing on your ability to procure cameras? So do you have an ongoing procurement process that will be affected if this money is not given to you immediately?
Senator, I don't have any money that's been made available to me other than what's being proposed in this bill. You may be referring to what I've heard, that there may be DOI monies made available to the Department of Parks and Recs.
Yes, that's what I recall.
But that is not my procurement, ma'am. I do not know the status. I do know that I've had initial conversations with Director Ibanez, and I've agreed that because of their lack of park rangers personnel, I've agreed that we can work cooperatively so that if there are parks in the central area, we can assist them with monitoring at the Gardner precinct, which is being constructed. So that's the cooperative and the collaboration that I'm working on with Director Ibanez at this point. His procurement, I'm not sure what the status is, and I'm not sure how much money, I'm not sure how much cameras he's getting. All I know is that I am willing to work with him.
I just wanted to set that for the record because, you know, we are operating right now with this bill under an emergency situation. The emergency situation being public safety. This bill addresses a measure that will assist with the deterrence and reporting of criminal activity. And so what I was trying to establish from you is, based on an emergency scenario, do we stand to lose the ability to obtain this camera that is vitally needed to address an emergency situation? Because, I'm not speaking about the need for cameras. I'm not speaking about the fact that we have a crime problem on Guam. I'm not speaking specifically to that. I'm speaking only to the need to make monies available now to address an emergency situation, and whether these monies are directly tied into addressing an emergency situation, or is it really just an appropriation for cameras that have yet to be procured, that have yet to even be contemplated, where there's no real plan in place? Is there no real plan in place, or is there a concrete plan in place?
So, Senator, there is a plan in place, and we will work with what we need to do if this bill is passed to get the procurement done. Working with the different agencies that work with the Guam Police in procurement. As far as the emergency itself, when you lose 5 officers to a deployment, when you lose 2 officers already to an ongoing deployment, and we have not had the ability to hire a police cycle that we just started. So I think there's an emergent need to get technology to help the Guam Police Department in as many areas as it can. And so this technology, we all know, we've seen the power of surveillance. You see it in the neighborhood watch chat groups. They help solve crimes. And so that's to me, that's the emergent need of getting this bill passed so that we can get the assistance.
Thank you. And then again, we can argue 1.5 million emergencies under similar circumstances, and we're setting a precedent here, and that's all I'm trying to establish, is I can argue an emergency that will direly affect our tourism if we don't have bathrooms and they're peeing in the jungles. That's an emergency. Emergencies are not having an autism center available for people who need help desperately to manage their day-to-day lives and their ability to cope with a situation like that. There are so many emergencies, but when we set the precedent for what is genuinely an emergency that has to affect the transmittal of funds or else, that's where I'm just making the argument, and I voted in favor of this bill, I believe, Bill 20. I'm not making the argument that we don't need to do this. I am making an argument against the guise of an emergency and addressing Bill 132 in this manner based on an emergency, which I think from your explanation we can stretch any scenario that involves GPD or public health or education, the three top priorities of this government, into an emergency situation. You know, and so that's what I'm doing, sir. I'm respectfully acknowledging your situation with the loss of manpower, but I believe too that a good way to address the loss of manpower is to get additional manpower, because a camera can't do the same as an officer, obviously, and so, you know, if you were to rationalize what is the best course of action, I think that there are many other courses of action that can take precedent over something like this under the guise of an emergency. But thank you for that clarification. I would hope that, you know, that if cameras are so critical, that there is in fact a measure to procure them ASAP, and from what I understand, there is no procurement even in place.
Thank you. Does any other senators have any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Senator Kelly Marsh, Titan.
Afade San Mananasi Zuus. So I have written an amendment. Should this bill go through, it seems important that the real intent is been able to be fully supported and kept intact. So with the amendment, it would be taking into consideration, we understand that procurement processes for the government of Guam can be rather lengthy. And we don't want the intent to be diverted because the timeline is steadily becoming shorter. So it's to take the original deadline of September 30th, 2019, which now is right around the corner, to provide for a more reasonable amount of time and provide a few additional months to December 31st, 2019. So I want to make sure that with this amendment, this is amenable to the fiscal processes, that the funds will be able to continue to meet the need that has been identified in the way that we intended. So perhaps OFB?
I think, Senator, your question is more leaning towards the chief, is that if your amendment passes,
Right.
would it assist him so that his challenge is not as hard as it is right now if it's passed? Basically, Chief, I think she was asking if it's amended up to December. Is that what if I'm correct, Senator? You're asking, is he amendable to that if we allowed him more time to spend the money if this bill passes? Correct?
Right. Does that help better meet the intent so that the intent is not
Lost.
diverted? Yes.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. If you give me up to December, then you know, it allows me more time for procurement. And even if it was September, I'll do my best. But I think December will probably, I think for the body would be a little bit more realistic, considering some of the procurement challenges that we're all aware of.
Do you have any other questions?
And so, oh, okay.
Yes. Mr. Rosario?
Yeah. Good morning, Senators. My name is Gaudencio Rosario. They usually call me Goody. I'm the Deputy Financial Manager at Department of Administration. I'm reading the bill, and I agree that the funding availability should be extended, probably not even to December 31st, but probably up to fiscal year 2020. Reading the bill, it includes maintain security cameras. When we're talking about maintain, after the equipments are purchased, there's that time frame of to be maintained. It could be after a year, after the 2 years. So it has to be factored into, I guess, the next their budget. Yeah, just.
Well, that brings a subsequent question then. At the public hearing, I remember, but perhaps I need some additional details to remember all of the testimony. Is the $200,000 at this point in time, is that specifically identified for the equipment to purchase, operate, and install the security cameras? Or is the maintaining in this bill, is that more about the protocol and making sure that plans are in place? Or any funds identified for the maintenance?
No, ma'am. So if we get the 200,000, this is just the seed money to get started. So as we move along, then we'll look at maintenance, because when you buy things new, then you expect that there's an initial life to that equipment, and so what we do is we plan for future maintenance. So we can include maintenance in our 2020 budget. Moving forward, how do we maintain the cameras?
So you're saying that the $200,000 is for the purchase and the immediate operation and installation, and then you can work into your budget, future budgets, the maintenance?
Yes, ma'am. So as the chief, I would focus my attention first on procuring the equipment and making sure that we have the proper equipment in place, and then we can move forward with maintenance. Yeah.
So going back to the original question, then the December 31st, 2019, it allows you to do those initial steps with the $200,000.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Castro, you had a question, sir?
I do. I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Chief, if I could take us back maybe 5 years, specifically to Maragata, okay, because, as a professional and as our neighbor in the village, about 5-7 years ago, my car was stolen at a certain time. And I took it upon myself to go house to house and pass out flyers. And I discovered, and I shared it with your investigative team, that there were 13 incidences in maybe 6 months. Some were reported and some weren't. I guess the point would be, and it's a yes or no question, because important considerations were raised. In terms of your command preference, and I'm speaking from personal experience, firsthand knowledge of the activities in my municipality, if you, as a commander for the police department, had a decision to make whether to deploy a movable or mobile camera system, okay, and I'm going to tell you based on the data that these incidences experience high foot traffic in a specific area between 10:30 p.m. and 3:30 a.m., Friday through Sunday. So my question would be, Chief, if you had the option, your command preference, to deploy a camera system that would be stationary there, would you choose a camera system, or would you station a police officer for a matter of deterrence or even investigation? Would you choose a camera system, yes or no?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Senator Castro. We would prefer a camera system because the camera system can be monitored remotely. And then you can have multiple camera systems monitoring multiple locations remotely. And the great thing about a camera, sir, you don't have to feed them or make them drink water.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that's a yes. And I don't want to understate the importance of FTEs in the force, but I think in this specific instance, since you referenced Neighborhood Watch, I think this would be the most appropriate use of limited resources in that instance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, Senator Terlai behind you was waving.
Oh,
I'll get him
sure.
first and then you be next. Senator Terlai, Tito, the oversight chair of the police department.
Mr. Chairman, I want to yield to my favorite speaker first.
All right, Senator Terlai. Madam Speaker, your question, ma'am.
Si Jules Masi, Senador Terlahid, and si Jules Masi, Tatlu, Senador San Agustin, Podesti na proponi. Mr. Chief, First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you guys being here, but more importantly, I want to say that it is the government of Guam's basic responsibility to provide for the public safety, public health, and even the education of our community. And as recently, you are aware of a lot of the robberies, the rapes, the break-ins, and even as recent as people getting brave enough, or criminals getting brave enough to go into houses that are on the main street and going into houses when the people are there. And when we talk about the emergency for wanting to know the safety of our residents, and just hearing the comment that you spoke about with the good senator from, I would say, Barragata, you talked about the need that the cameras would assist. Based on your professional support, has the cameras that have already been implemented to date, have they showed an increase of solving the crimes that are present today? And based on your I want to say more than 3 decades in the police force?
Yes, ma'am. Surveillance cameras have solved a lot of crimes. We've used them to solve murders, burglaries, robberies, thefts. So they provide assistance in a wide spectrum of criminal activity. So, cameras don't discriminate. They take, recordings of whatever's in front of them and whatever they can see. So they've been very, very helpful in solving crimes.
So the criticalness of making sure that the procurement and the support of this, based on the opportunity that this body has to facilitate and support, do you agree that the criticalness is there to move and facilitate this legislation forward?
I would ask the body, the legislatures, to please support it, yes.
Thank you. And at this time, Mr. Chair, if I may, there was an extension to ask for a timeline, and that timeline to move in as far as working the procurement and making sure that we didn't end. I wanted to know if that timeline is provided, would that in any way take away from the facilitation trying to acquire that because of the critical need that is needed? Would that impede on any way, shape, or form? I know it may have been asked earlier, but I want to ask that again, because in order for me to support an amendment that may be proffered on the floor, and I'm going to ask when that amendment will be proffered, is it when we rise or when we're in here? I want to know, is it, you said that that timeline is there. I want to make sure that there's no impediment for that if that amendment is proffered.
No, ma'am. And like I said, the December timeline just gives us a little bit more time. But, of course, if we can get it done before December, then, of course, we'll take every opportunity that we can to get it done as quickly as possible.
Okay. Okay. And, Mr. Chair, if I may, should we proffer that amendment now, or we're going to wait until we finish the discussions?
It's after we finish all the questions, then I'll dismiss the panel, and then I'll accept any amendments to the bill.
Okay.
And then we'll move forward.
Thank
you. Senator Chalai, you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Before I share my thoughts, I just want to thank the panel up there for finding the time to share these important moments with all of us. And before, because the speaker had mentioned about, making an amendment later on, but I just want to ask a few questions regarding, this particular bill and the amendments. Have there been any cost analysis on the surveillance camera itself, and how many surveillance camera do we need? And how much each camera would cost? Because, we got 200,000. And this is why I don't want to make an amendment until, I hear from the chief on if it's enough or not. If it's enough, then that's fine with me. But if it's not, maybe we can go ahead and do an amendment to allow the finding of whatever supplement that we need to do. I just want the numbers of surveillance camera based on the locations that is proposed to where those surveillance camera will be installed.
Senator, thank you for that. So, based on testimony that we submitted in the original bill, so what I have from my staff is that to purchase 14 sites through CCTV is approximately $80,000, and that's just for the purchase. That doesn't include the installation and the monthly service charge. So I would say that this 200,000 is a start, and we can use it, moving forward to see, how much the costs are. But initially, right now, based on what we know from what we gathered, we're looking at about $80,000 for 14
So
cameras.
you have made a count on just the different locations that we're going to install these cameras, and you mentioned 80,000 for 14 cameras on the different locations, right? That's aside from not mentioning the services and the maintenance and all that. That's not included.
That is correct, Senator.
In your most honest estimation, Chief, do you think that 200,000 would suffice for the whole activities of the cameras? And never mind the service, we'll do that later on. But do you think it's fair to say that 200,000 is enough?
No, sir. Of course, 200,000, based on what we know, is not enough. But I believe we need to start somewhere, and I believe this would be a good start.
Okay. So in your honest opinion, 200,000 is enough to start the program out?
Yes, sir. 200,000 is a sufficient amount to get started.
Okay, so I don't have to make that amendment then. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
A point of inquiry, Mr. Chair, if I may, to the chief, based on what was just stated earlier. Is he or is the department continuing to ascertain additional grant funding? I know that we received funding from the Department of Interior before, but is their team continuing to look for more grant funding, working closely with the administration as it relates to providing the surveillance cameras for more locations within the island?
Yes, ma'am. So, of course, we take every opportunity to avail ourselves of federal grants wherever they're made available. However, I would point out that I've had discussions with GVB, the Guam Visitors Bureau, because we'd like to grow some of the surveillance camera systems down in the Tuman, Tumuning area. I'll give you an example, and I pointed this out to the Guam Visitors Bureau. The intersection right at Ocapelas, you have Sheraton down one street, you have Outrigger down the other street, and we have, I think I've seen a couple of those B&Bs in the side streets. So we have a lot of foot traffic in that area. And as recent as 2 days ago, there was another attempt again for purse snatching. So I've pointed out to GVB that's what we call policing a hot spot. And so I've asked them to work with me to provide surveillance cameras in that area because there's no system in place at this point. And that's just to grow the system that we have in place in Tuman. So we're expanding it now to the intersection of Ocapelas because it's a very busy place. We've had multiple purse snatchings and robberies in that area. And so this is our effort, to kind of helping the Guam Police Department, protect, our citizens, not just the tourists, but, our local, our citizens, our community at large, become targets of robbers in that area.
Thank you. Senator Lee, you had a question, ma'am?
Sejus Masi, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the panel members for joining us this morning. Chief, I also want to just wish you a happy National Police Week. I know we've been celebrating all week, but a happy National Police Week to all the men and women in uniform that are serving and protecting our island. Just one quick question, Chief. If we authorize this appropriation in 7 working days instead of today, what would the consequences be for your procurement of these cameras?
I'm sorry, Senator, I didn't hear the question.
If we authorize this appropriation in 7 working days from today instead of today, what would the consequences be for your procuring these cameras? If we acted 7 days from today instead of acting today immediately, what would the consequences be for your procurement of these cameras?
We just lost 7 days, and so it'd be nice to get it out sooner the better, because we all know that procurement is a challenge in the government of Guam Island, government-wide, whether it's the Guam Police.
But you could also get it done 7 days from today. That's correct.
I'm not going to argue the point. I mean, but I would say that it'd be nice to get it done sooner rather than later. I think 7 days does make a world of difference. Sometimes in procurement, it really does.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lee. If there are no other questions,
Mr. Chair? Oh, sorry.
Oh, Senator Jim, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question. Thank you. Chief, what's the projected deployment time for the troops that you just that were recently deployed? The deployment time, length of their deployment?
The deployment that
Yes.
I spoke about? So I have 2 deployments. One just started in January of this year, and it will terminate in January of next year. We have one that just started 2 weeks ago, and it's another 1-year deployment. So those officers will not come back until May of 2020.
What's your total count on the officers that are deployed?
I have 7 that are on 1-year deployments, and then I have about 2 that are on 6-month deployments with possible extensions.
With the deployed manpower gone, how do you compensate for the safety of your officers while on the beat?
So with the deployment, unfortunately, because we've maximized the amount of officers that we can move around to shift, what that happens is that, of course, we incur additional costs, personnel costs, such as overtime. But also, we may, if need be, then we would have to pull officers from other specialized units, for example, criminal investigation, maybe even internal affairs. And we're going to have to shift them, of course, to patrol, because that's where the primary response for the Guam Police Department is at.
So that critically affects then your department?
Yes, deployments do affect the department, personnel-wise, and costs.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Nelson, you have a question now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I want to thank the panel also for taking the time out to be here. Chief, thank you very much. It's a welcome sight to see you here. I just want to ask, so Chief, you stated earlier, one of my colleagues asked you a question, if you would prefer cameras over a full-time employee, and you stated yes, that was your preference. So my question to you is, now that we are giving you a funding source for cameras, are we anticipating to also see a reduction in your force?
Absolutely not, Senator. It is my intention to grow the department in terms of personnel, just as much as we use technology to help with solving crime.
So do you still prefer cameras over personnel?
Senator, if you can find the money, I'd prefer both. Really, I would.
But which would you prefer first?
I can't choose, Senator. They both provide value to the department, really.
That's why I'm asking, because it was a little bit of a concern to me that, I wanted to ensure that I was not in the wrong mindset, thinking that technology would replace our boots on ground, because nothing could replace our boots on ground. They're a deterrence, but they're also a proactive measure and a safety measure that can act in response. Cameras are monitoring tools. And
Yes,
so
ma'am.
thank you for alleviating that concern, because I just wanted to ensure that we're not replacing full-time employees for monitoring tools.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, not at all. Yeah, we continue to want to grow the department, and I continue to work to grow this department in
Thank you,
terms of
Chief.
personnel.
Thank you. You also stated that cameras has shown an increase in solving crimes. Can we get statistics for the crimes that have been solved? Perhaps not right now. I'm sure you don't have it on hand, but perhaps for the past maybe 3 years is a reasonable ask. If that can be submitted to the legislature, that we can see the statistics from when cameras were installed to current, to show the increase in monitoring tools, the increase in solving crimes with utilizing cameras as monitoring tools.
Yes, ma'am. I'll work on that information.
Okay, thank you. And one last question, Mr. Chair. I know I'm almost up at my 3 minutes. I have a concern as well, because we are pushing a bill on the floor that foregone a public hearing, even though it's a like bill. But this bill is something that the governor vetoed, perhaps because of appropriations measure. And so it's a little bit unclear why the governor would veto something, a bill in its entirety, or why the administration would veto a bill in its entirety, defeating the whole cause of the bill, when we've seen bills already line item vetoed for a same function. So a concern of mine is that we're here based on certifying...
Point of information, line item veto is only done in budget bills, not laws.
This is an appropriation bill, Mr. Chair. Point of information.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. So
Okay.
we're here with certifying that that we're here hearing this bill, that it is emergency conditions exist involving danger to the public health or safety, and therefore the public hearing requirement for said bills is waived in accordance with 2 GCA subsection 2103 alpha. And so I'd like to feel assured and comfortable that we are doing the right thing here by foregoing a public hearing and hearing this bill, and not setting a precedence, which is dangerous to set precedents before we go into a public hearing. So, Chief, can you just please explain one last time how pertinent $200,000 for CCTV cameras is to the force, and why it is an emergency today and not in 7 days, when we're going to have a session where we could possibly have had a public hearing in the meantime?
Senator, so we've lost a lot of officers to deployment. I was amazed at the number of people that resigned or retired last year. So the department, the size of the department currently is nowhere near where it needs to be. We are down below 300 officers. And so if that doesn't speak to a dire set of circumstances as far as personnel is concerned, that I'm not sure what is. So when you can't recruit fast enough, and recruitment is another piece that takes a while, so what can you do? Where can you turn to provide assistance to the Guam Police? And I think this is where where technology comes in. Technology helps. It helps solve crimes. It helps keeps communities safe. And so, and like I said, if that's what we need to do, then I think it's urgent enough, considering where we're at today, that the sooner we get it, it's better rather than later.
Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate that. And thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. My colleagues, let me just remind everybody that the rule on the emergency was already ruled earlier. We don't need to discuss it. We're already at this level. We're doing the committee of the whole. Do we have any further question? If not,
Point
I
of
will.
information.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Just a point of information, Mr. Chair. I understand that the rule was discussed.
Okay.
However, we received an informal email for the description of the rule, and I believe we need a formal letter submitted to clerks for that rule. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll make sure you get a copy. Senator, you have another question?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, another
Mr.
question.
Chairman, Mr.
sorry.
Chairman, I was being polite. Point of personal privilege. I'm just
Yes,
waiting for the
okay.
returning speaker.
Senator Will.
Maila zabe na klaro hafa nu kumekeleku. Okay, munga muna lebo kifinohu. When I asked the chief, it was specific to the issue of neighborhood watch, and in that specific case, that's it. That was not in any way to infer that the chief or the department or any NWP Barrigada would prefer cameras over men or women in the force. I just want to make it clear to the listening audience. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Point
Thank
of
you.
personal privilege, Mr. Chair. I was not inciting that the previous speaker was mentioning such. It was a thought that came to my mind that I wanted to clarify, and the chief of police did so. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
Senator Therese, you have another question, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This for OFB, so I'm reading the veto message, and it says that Bill 20, in attempting to appropriate funds from the GRSP, which is the Guam Retirement Security Plan, did not take into account the residual appropriation left by Public Law 35-7, an earlier appropriation that we made from the same account. So that part, is it your position that access to special fund balances information, for example, the GRSP real-time balance, would assist OFB in being able to determine that information? That's how that would have been helpful.
Senator, what it is when the administration identified a prior year fund available balance. Basically, what it is just money that's sitting in an account that basically has not been either appropriated or has not been obligated or has not been encumbered for a specific purpose. Normally, what would happen is that those available balance will carry over into the next fiscal year and be part of the bottom line appropriation, which would be available for appropriation for that year and continuing years on. As far as accessing to that information, as I stated earlier, we are in the process of trying to get more access to certain files within administration to give us that ability to look, at least on the OAP side, what accounts are actually available. We have some access that can determine some balances, but not all.
What type of file? Is it just called the special fund balances or something
No,
else?
it's, you're talking about general ledgers, you're talking about
Okay.
accounts receivable, accounts payable, those type of files that are under
right.
the administration.
Okay. And then the veto letter also says the 2019 FY budget had been fully allocated. So therefore, there are insufficient funds to appropriate. And so my other question is, did BBMR or DOA advise the legislature prior to passage of this bill that this language was not sufficient?
I'm not too sure, Senator. Normally the bills, I assume by the time the bills get to the Bureau of Budget or to the administration, it's already kind of like passed by the legislature, and it's up to them to kind of figure out what they want to do at that point. I'm not too sure whether or not they're involved in the review or process or deliberations before bills are actually passed, and in this particular one, I'm not too sure.
When we, I guess, so the bill that was sent down by the governor and now we are entertaining as bill number 132, it leaves this amount of $1,464 in the Guam Retirement Security Plan, $1,000. But this is after they've told us in previous testimony, or the whole premise of our bill is that we've been told they're never going to use this Guam Retirement Security Plan. Is there a reason why we are leaving $1,400 in there and not just putting that over towards GPD as well?
You can answer it, Steve, but the bottom line is, number one, all the amendments we're going to discuss, and you're asking about something about that money, I think there is an amendment in line after the panel's dismissed that will reveal that answer.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Okay.
Okay, it'll be coming out.
So, yeah, so there's no reason, as far as you know, that that money should stay there, Steve?
I would recommend, Senator, that since it's such a nominal amount, and I don't think it serves any purpose to the retirement, especially for the intended purpose of the original appropriation, I would suggest that we just delete the whole thing, put the 1,646 back into the general fund.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. And so for the chief, if I may ask you, there are several provisions in law already that allow the governor to spend money, first of all, in an emergency. So has that been invoked to get cameras, as far as you know? It's like for emergency procurement, yes.
None that I'm aware of.
And there's also a law that allows personnel to be hired on a contract basis in an emergency to human life. And I'm thinking this is if we're short of police, then I guess I'm wondering, are you considering that also?
Well, I know that in the current budget, I am allowed to hire retired police officers. You know, unfortunately, they're not knocking on my doors trying to get in.
I see. And then you said that you haven't been able to get the police cycle, that you're just starting that. Is there an impediment? Because this has been something we've talked about since the last budget cycle, and it's been touted as we're getting new police officers over and over, and so I'm very surprised to hear you say that we're only beginning or something like that.
Yes, Senator. So, you know, since assuming office in January, in the short 6 months or 5 months that I've been here, I've actually been able to recruit. I have 30 openings, so I have 28 people on board. So I'm not sure what's occurred in the past, but I think I'm further along than prior.
So when do you anticipate getting them actually on the force?
We don't start training until our academy until June, because we still have some recruits that are still in processing. So we start in June. We anticipate academics to be done by November, and then we have on-the-job training, some in-service training, and then OJT, and then we should have them out by early next year.
So is there a balance from not hiring them sooner from FY19?
No, ma'am. I continue to work with DOA because I have 30 openings, and I really intend to work with them to get all 30 filled.
All right. But they were, I don't know, I think they were budgeted to be filled earlier. So if they haven't been filled, is there like half a year's worth of that available still? Steve, do you know that? Or Goody?
Yeah, as far as I know, HR is processing some of the recruitment. So.
All right, okay. Yes. I don't know, Chief. Yeah, maybe anyone who has that information.
I have 30 openings, and I have 27 on board, and I am working with DOA to fill the last 3. So I intend to have 30, yeah. So initially we only had 15 openings, and that was federally funded. Yeah.
Oh, you only had,
We only had 15 initially funded under the COPS program, the Department of Justice program. But we were able to look at our budget, and with lapse funds, we were able to open up an additional 15 positions.
Oh, so you did use the lapse funds?
Yes,
That's
so we did. Yeah, so we did target our lapse funds that we were tracking.
That's what I
to hire. Yeah, so we did hire additional people.
Okay, great.
with what we asked.
Speaker,
Okay,
you
no.
have,
Cito Masi, Mr. Chair. I have a follow-up inquiry based on the answers on fulfilling. There are some cadets that have previously gone to the community college in Balea and have not been able to be assigned. Usually after every year, I know that the list gets recommissioned or whatever. Have you looked at any of those the listing that was previously established for those who have already gone through the training and have already got the credentials, but because at that time, a year or several years ago, there wasn't any openings? Because I was told that based on the previous the previous administration, that they weren't picking up any of those who had already gone through the training program.
So the job announcement requires a high school diploma.
Right.
And there was an initial there was an amendment to add English, but we've removed that job requirement in the announcement so that we can open up to a larger pool of individuals. So now there was 200 some applicants now that we have waiting to get processed by DOA for their evaluation and rating.
So the 3 more that you're still needing to fulfill this cycle, can you pull from that 200 that you have?
And that's exactly what I was pointing out, is that because we've exhausted the initial certification list, we've taken everybody that we could take out of that list already. So we have nobody to pull from. So we need to go back and work at DOA, HR, to do the testing and pretty much the whole recruitment process to get me an additional list of eligibles.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
thank
Chair.
you. Back to you, Senator.
Thank you so
Senator
much.
Ryan.
My final question, Chief, is something I was going to write you a letter on, but you're here, so it's great. I'm happy if you could answer. So in regards to the hotspots, so yes, we've had GVB come in for public hearings and talk about the hotspots for Tumon and other areas that they hope to cover. Working with you, they've increased their visitor safety officers by contract down there also, and some are in Agotnia now, we've seen them, and other places. DPR has a plan, of course, so all of these sound fantastic. We're going to have increased security in a lot of areas where our tourists are and where locals are, the residents. And even the Korean consulate gave us statistics as to what she calls the hot spots, right? And but some of these, from my lay observation, are at businesses such as, they name them, very specific businesses. It's happening, the crime hotspots are in these parking lots. And so I appreciate that we want to take care of everybody, but I'm wondering if the police department has any, plans to ask these businesses to do their share of ensuring safety in their parking lots. Some of them have no security or anything according to GVB, so it's kind of like the police, it's all on you to take care of these private business parking lots. But do you have any are you able to get them to assist, especially in the hot spots that have already been identified?
Yes, ma'am. So the Guam Police, through our community policing effort, we do have what we refer to as like our business watch program. And so what we're doing is that, we continue to reach out even to small mom and pop stores. And we work with them, to make sure that they're less of a target. And so as we look at the hot spots, we work with these businesses to see if they need to understand that they probably need to avail themselves of technology, surveillance cameras to help them, because I'm sure they're also challenged with providing actual physical security personnel.
That sounds very like we're going to encourage them, but I'm wondering if we can do more, kind of like, tell them we're going to take care of the JFK intersection, the public roads, but the private parking lots, those you have to, is there any more clout we can bring to that, I guess is my question, because I don't want them to rely on our public funds to take care of their private businesses. I feel like that's not fair. We will do our part, and hope we're trying to put all our taxpayer money to do our part for all the public spaces that we can.
Yes, ma'am. And just like with anything else, the most we can do is make a suggestion, and then we ask and point them in the right direction. It's up to them at that point, whether they decide to do it or not.
Thank you very much, Chief and Goody and OFB Sidusmas.
Thank you. Is there one more question? Yes, Senator Torres.
Just to follow up.
Follow up. Okay.
Chief, in light of all that has been discussed here, will you then be seeking an emergency declaration from the governor's office to allow you to do a procurement or a waiver of procurement to get these cameras, if in fact your deployment situation and your inability to engage a cycle immediately, all these factors come in? I'm just wondering if that's a logical thing, or are you, and this is in anticipation of what may come down as an amendment to increase the timeline to expend these funds. Will you in the interest of public safety and in this emergency situation that you're in, get a declaration of emergency and just, or do we need to allow you more time? What would be the best course of action if you were to recommend it to this body in terms of procurement?
Senator, if we're getting close to the deadline of whatever deadline is set with this bill, then of course it is my duty to reach out then to the governor, to GSA, to BBMR, to DOA, to move this along. And if that's what I need to speak to the governor too about, maybe invoking her assistance, then of course I will do that. We don't want to lose the opportunity to expend this money.
And that's why I want to ask if there's a need to extend it out, or if you're going to actually go through the most expedient course in a situation of an emergency as declared, to bypass procurement. So maybe we don't need to give you more time.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I will dismiss the panel, and we'll recess for lunch, and then our return, I know there are amendments, then we'll entertain the amendments, and then we move from there. All right? You have another question first before we?
Just to get a little bit more detail about the procurement process. As you mentioned, and as I mentioned, the procurement process, well, we've heard quite some stories about how long that can take. In the short number of months that you've been there, have you gone through the procurement process, and are you able to gauge how long it's taken? And I don't know how fair a comparison that is with perhaps something of a larger scale, of a more technical scale, but if you could provide us any insight?
So we're working with procuring vehicles, and so that's something that's been in the works. Most of the procurement that I've done to date as the chief is smaller in scale, nothing at this level yet. So it's still a learning process for me, and it's still a work in progress. But we understand the challenges of procurement all in all.
With the vehicle procurement, how long has that been in the works? Where would you say you're at this point with that procurement? Any predictions for how much longer it might be taking, just to give us some understanding about the months that we may be talking about?
We're actually at the stage where it's going to be put out for a bid by GSA. So it's taken me, probably 3 months since I've come in, to track the progress.
Okay, and then you're just now getting to that stage of bids, and then there's still a long ways to go down that road before the vehicles are actually.
Yeah, we're a lot closer now than before. A lot closer now than before. I can say that.
And the cameras themselves, they will involve, as part of that bid, some installation. So, I mean, it's beyond just achieving the cameras themselves. Then it will need to be the installation of the cameras as a part of the work that needs to accompany this.
Yeah. So installation will come, and so there's different types. I'm not the expert, but I've heard that there may be wireless cameras, so that they probably don't need a wired connection, so that may be an option that's available.
So just Masi, that helps me think of the context a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you. No other questions. The panel is dismissed or released. Thank you for your participation, and we will be on recess until 2:30. Thank you.